On the deadliest day for the U.S. military in a decade, we talked to the only Coloradan in Congress who served.
I caution folks regarding the Monday morning quarterbacking we're seeing on military operations.
He doesn't believe the U.S. should leave Afghanistan by the end of the month.
This is tough stuff. This is complicated. These are really hard missions.
Another Coloradan in Congress is already fundraising off the terror attack on U.S. troops. A struggling neighborhood wonders whether Denver's shiny new sports arena project would really benefit them. Schools have the option of weekly surveillance COVID testing. Many of them don't want it. And a high school football team climbs a 14er. When they got to the top, their coach had an idea. All that is next. The only Coloradan in Congress who served in the military says the U.S. should not pull out of Afghanistan by next week, even after today's suicide attacks that killed 13 American service members and dozens of Afghan civilians. Democratic Representative Jason Crow said we must stay long enough to help American civilians and our Afghan allies escape. A faction of the ISIS terrorist group is claiming responsibility for the dual bombings. And more attacks on the airport are expected as the massive U.S. airlift out of Kabul continues. The deal with the Taliban requires American troops be out by August 31st. Congressman Crow said this afternoon he thinks that the airlift must continue until every American who wants to get out goes, along with all Afghan special immigrant visa holders and their families. Crow said that could be done in weeks, but not by the August 31st deadline. He's been quite vocal on this, so I asked him this afternoon whether he worries that criticizing President Biden reduces his ability to impact the situation. After all, Republicans openly said they couldn't criticize former President Trump and still retain their influence.
Oh, absolutely not. And I have been critical. I have not been reluctant to pull my punches. I've been very clear on several occasions that, number one, I thought this evacuation should have happened a long time ago, that we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now in some respects, not every respect, but in some respects, in very important respects. Had we started the evacuation, both of American citizens and our Afghan partners back in April. As soon as the president had made the decision to start the withdrawal and end our combat mission, almost immediately after that, I formed the Honoring Our Promises working group. We sent letters, we held press conferences. We have been yelling at the top of our lungs to anybody who would listen to us, saying start the evacuation. I think notable is the fact that I have no qualms whatsoever raising those concerns with a Democratic administration. That's extremely different from what you saw under the prior administration, where dissent was not tolerated, people couldn't ask questions.
Crow said today he does not believe that President Biden is going to get the U.S. into another sustained military engagement when Biden promised the U.S. would hunt down those responsible for today's attacks. Colorado's Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert has already launched a fundraising effort linked to today's terror attacks that killed U.S. service members. In a fundraising video, Boebert said, quote, "We don't need to wait for the beheadings," directing donors to her campaign fundraising page seeking donations from $25 to $2,900. Colorado, the 38th state, will have lost 38 of its citizens to the war in Afghanistan, provided that there's not another notification team in our state right now telling a 39th Colorado family that their son or daughter was killed in America's longest war. Sergeant Daniel Romero of Lafayette was the first, killed in 2002. The last Coloradan known to have died in Afghanistan was Sergeant First Class Will Lindsay of Cortez, killed in 2019. The Afghanistan war has spanned generations. There's a Vietnam veteran who volunteered to go to Afghanistan, and he was killed there just short of his 60th birthday. And for years now, there have been service members in Afghanistan a third that man's age, men and women younger than the war itself. The last administration and the present one agreed that it was time for this to end. And with the end in sight, we wait and hope that the 38th state does not lose a 39th Coloradan in Afghanistan. Mayor Hancock's idea to build a medium-sized sports arena at the National Western Complex is being pitched to taxpayers as a benefit for the Globeville and El Rio-Swansea neighborhoods. There are neighbors there who don't buy that. Here's Victoria De Leon.
In the Globeville and El Rio-Swansea neighborhoods, it's not hard to find passion and pride.
There's a need for that organizing and that's what it's all about.
Alfonso
Changing the
Espino's
condition.
passion stems from the issues facing the people in the neighborhood he loves.
The environmental pollution, the degradation, the disinvestment, the underdevelopment, the crime, the health hazards.
As a member of the Globeville and Elyria-Swansea Coalition, he takes pride in advocating for this area and calling for a stop to gentrification. That brings the story here to the public land near the National Western Complex, a development project the GES Coalition says won't benefit the community if approved by voters in November.
There's a lot of pressing problems in the city, housing and health issues being at the top of that list, but they sit here and they're gonna sell you a new arena.
At the core of the mission is about creating this neighborhood place, creating a place that's about food, healthy food access and food equity.
Brad Buchanan is the CEO of the National Western Center Authority.
We'll be looking at what other uses happen here on the campus, including potentially affordable housing to help do our part to address those concerns around gentrification.
He says they're committed to helping this neighborhood thrive, but there are always two sides to the story. Alfonso says developments like the I-70 project and National Western increased the cost of living and already drove out some of his friends.
This place, just like that.
But the pride and will to fight for this community will never leave.
That they could try to delegitimize our concerns as much as they can, but they can't ignore us.
And so there's always been opposition from some community members to new developments in the area. But in 2015, the National Western Center tells us 72% of people in the Elyria-Swansea neighborhood voted in support of this redevelopment project. In Globeville, Kyle, that percentage of support was about 78.
As you point to, Victoria, this really kind of looks at some existing rifts that have been around for a long time in terms of what Mayor Hancock and developers want, and then what folks in the neighborhood say would truly be of assistance to them.
Yeah, that's true. And something that came out of my conversation with Alfonso said that, they're kind of just tired of asking for help. They don't feel ignored, but they think it's just best to take it into their own hands. No one knows the community better than they do.
Victoria De Leon reporting. Thank you, Victoria. So the $450 million bond package that includes that arena, the thing the Denverites are going to vote on later this year, has a number of different parts, including library expansions, park construction, and cash for Denver's sad sidewalks. The sidewalks need a lot of help, and previous help, taxpayer money, has not resulted in all that much. State auditor found last year that a program designed to fix and repair the city's sidewalks was way behind. So this go-around would include $12 million for sidewalk construction in City Council Districts 3, 5, 7, 8, and 10. City Council voted to break out the arena from the libraries and sidewalks and everything else, but to put all the parts on the ballot in November. The State Health Department has used its mobile air quality lab to come to a pretty obvious conclusion. Pollution is higher in Commerce City near the Suncor refinery. Readings collected between mid-May and mid-July show higher fine particulate pollution in Commerce City and North Denver. Enough of it in the air that it can have an impact on people with sensitive health. Fine particulate pollution comes from cars, from wildfires, and from refineries like Suncor, although the mobile lab itself doesn't point to individual sources. Suncor is paying millions of dollars in settlement money for multiple air pollution violations, and a law passed this year will require more real-time air monitoring at heavy polluter sites. While we are talking about air pollution, would like to recommend an article from another media outlet in town that I think you should read. Do you know that coal power plant that's right along I-25 when you drive down to Colorado Springs? It's done burning coal. Colorado Public Radio did an excellent piece on the woman who managed that plant through the end of its coal era. The Martin Drake power plant is almost a century old. It's going to shift to natural gas for a little while, and then eventually Colorado Springs Utilities, which runs it, is going to tear down that plant as they transition to renewable sources like wind, solar, hydro. CPR's Allie Budner has an article I really think is worth your time. I'll link to it on the next Facebook page. Schools can get COVID tests from the state. Many haven't, which raises questions about how they're tracking the spread of cases.
We're going to skip a scrimmage and we're going to go do this hike.
A coach has an idea for high altitude training, an unusual formation at the summit. Next. testing in schools is beyond academics this year. COVID testing is an option for Colorado school districts with the state's support. Weekly surveillance testing through the state health department is available. Our Mark Salinger looks at why large school districts in the metro area haven't opted in.
And we're thrilled to have kids walk back in the door.
At Clear Creek High School, a new year brings new precautions.
So it's masking, vaccinations, hand washing, and now the fourth layer will be testing offered twice a week.
Karen Quanbeck is the superintendent of the district. She's made the decision to make twice weekly COVID tests available at school to every student and staff member starting next month. Admittedly, she doesn't know how many will participate.
Those are all really hard decisions. These aren't things that we typically as educators are wrestling with.
Unvaccinated employees will be required to test twice a week, though that's only a handful of people. The district is also considering requiring all student athletes to be tested regularly in order to participate. That's similar to what places like Jefferson County have required. The rest of the students can be tested voluntarily with the goal of finding infected students before the virus spreads.
We've had cases that have touched every school in our county already within the first week and a half, and that's been challenging.
Those smaller districts like Clear Creek will offer surveillance testing at schools. Larger districts are not, even though it's offered by the state health department. Denver Public Schools relies on parents, students, and staff self-reporting cases. The same goes for Jeffco schools, Douglas County schools, and Cherry Creek schools.
Maybe someone's walking in the door and they are asymptomatic and they're not aware, and so we can catch that before it even spreads within the school system.
School nurses like Shelby Hicks understand what's at stake. She now helps contact trace in Clear Creek schools.
Those students have been exposed to anyone else, or they've exposed other students.
Now they hope more testing will keep more students in class. Denver Public Schools says that at this point, the free testing that's available through the state is the best option for students and staff in their district to get tested. Think of those community sites that all of us can get tested at. Of course, that relies on parents and students taking it upon themselves to go get tested outside of school, which, Kyle, of course, some people worry that they're only going to get tested if they're feeling sick or anything like that. They aren't going to go and do preemptive testing.
Sure. I have to imagine, like everything else with COVID guidance, that schools are going to change decisions midstream throughout the year. And from the state's perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, there's a million things that can happen. I mean, think of how quarantines and learning, remote learning goes. I mean, some schools right now, like Jeffco Public Schools, if you're in quarantine, if you're at home, they're treating it as almost as if you're absent for the day. They're giving you your makeup homework that you have to take and turn in when you get back. But of course, that's so much different than it was last year.
Yeah, hopefully schools will find things that work. We'll highlight them here and more folks can take a look. Mark,
Exactly.
Thank you.
A break from the smoke and haze today with the passing weather system that's kept most of the haze and particulates to the north of us. Things will be changing in the next 24 hours as high pressure begins to rebuild over the area. Only 84 today, 103 in Lamar, comfortable temperatures in the high country, but we go warmer tomorrow. We're tracking a few thunderstorms across east central and southeastern Colorado tonight in that moist atmosphere. Out on the eastern plains, we've had 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts and some large hail. Storms all move out tonight. We've got a sunny day tomorrow, a warmer day with a few storms in extreme southeastern Colorado. Tonight, a stray shower, rumble of thunder, then clearing. Our low 58, tomorrow's high 92. Happy Friday. Beautiful Saturday. A Saturday night cool front means Sunday's high will be cooler at 85. Warm and dry Monday and Tuesday. Cooler with a chance for showers on Thursday. And a wonderful forecast for the Broncos game on Saturday. Temperature of 85 degrees.
The most Colorado thing we saw today is athleticism on top of climbing a 14er. A coach challenges his team at the summit. Let's kick it. That's next. The most Colorado thing we've seen today is football far higher than at Mile High. Hiking a 14er as a team-building exercise, that's a choice. It turned into a memorable and meaningful choice for a high school football team.
Go! Get here, get here, get here, get here.
Here in Gunnison, football is a very big thing in this town.
Do something, do something, do something.
If we can build this team, we are going to build our community.
Go!
Well, my name's Paul Vickers. I'm the Gunnison High School football coach. To me, motivation is paramount in anything you do.
But I'd say his number one message that Chuck tells us every day is be fantastic.
Be like awesome to everyone.
Okay, our team building exercise. Instead of doing a scrimmage, I wanted to do something that was out of the box different.
13,890 feet.
And I said, boys, we're going to go kick the world's highest field goal.
It was just a pretty big challenge for all of us because none of us have really done that before.
I picked Handy's Peak. It's just, 14,048 feet.
There's the goalpost, regulation height.
And we each had to carry a piece of the field goal up there, and Jose Sanchez was the kicker.
We set up the field goal. We got in our positions of kicking a field goal, and it just happened.
He was excited when he put it through, and I think he was a lot more excited than anyone that he got to keep the football afterwards, too.
And by going through this together, we now can hold ourselves tighter in our school and in our community.
Oh! Yeah! All right!
And yeah, that was a really cool celebration for him.
It's good! It's good!
Favorite part of that was when he's like, Handy's Peak, it's only 14,048 feet. Coach Vickers told our photojournalist Corky Scholl that he thinks they've got a record for the highest field goal ever. He's not certain. There could be another team out there kicking field goals on mountaintops. We're back with your feedback. And family's cross-country trip delayed but not stopped after a difficult diagnosis. That's next. Family trips are the highlight of the summer for so many of us. There's a father and daughter from Crescent Butte that had a big trip planned, and it turned into sort of a family mission. Kevin Standerford and his 9-year-old daughter Abby spent 2 months biking more than 4,000 miles, Washington to Maine, and they had planned that trip along the so-called Northern Tier route, but did not start it until after Kevin's wife, Abby's mother, was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a mastectomy. At that point, Kevin says their ride took on new meaning and new purpose.
The people you meet along the way, through life, whether it's a bike ride or it's a cancer battle, that's the spice of life.
Kevin's wife, Jennifer, encouraged them to go on that trip after her surgery. So the family used the ride to raise $30,000 to support people fighting breast cancer in the Gunnison Valley. Big stack of your feedback tonight. Daniel Ruth wrote in asking about the coal trains that you still see going south on the rail lines along Santa Fe. So we talked about that CPR article about how the coal plant on the north side of Colorado Springs closed down. He was curious why there's still coal headed south. I believe that there is a second coal plant, if I'm not mistaken, that isn't being phased out until later, that's also in the Springs area. Kelly wrote in with some feedback on last night's commentary about how adults can model civil discourse and how we didn't see that at Douglas County Schools mask meeting. Kelly thoughtfully writes, "Stop lying, Kyle. You are a garbage human. This is all propaganda." And Joe Racine says, "Kyle, nice suit. Interviewing? Joe, if you're doing your job in public, you are always interviewing." See you next time.